In the heart of Kane County, there's a tale to be told. A podcast that captures stories as the days unfold. Shining light on local heroes, their purpose and their youth. With each episode, a new voice takes the stage.
Greetings, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to lovekane.co. And today my guest is Andrew Sosnowski, and we're going to learn a little bit about Andrew, his background, and what his current ambitions are. Andrew, good to have you.
Yes, very nice to be here, Lance. Thank you for having me, and thank you for listeners to listening. My name is Andrew Sosnowski. I am an attorney. I've been an attorney here in Kane County for almost 35 years now. And I am currently the candidate for Kane County State's Attorney. I'm the Republican candidate for Kane County State's Attorney. And I can tell you a little bit about myself and why I'm doing that. Well, it all started for me with my students. I'm a professor at Aurora University, and I teach criminal law. Go figure, if I'm going to be the state's attorney. And I've been teaching criminal law, and I talk a lot about the duties of government, the three branches of government, the executive branch, legislative, judicial. And one day we were talking about the executive branch and the importance of enforcing laws. Now, a lot of these students want to be law enforcement officers, so we discuss law enforcement and how law enforcement are selected and what the process of that is from federal government to state. And then we end up getting to the prosecution of criminal behavior. We start talking about the state's attorney. And so we were talking about the state's attorney. I informed my students that I was a former prosecutor, and I have been. I was a former prosecutor in Kane for about almost 10 years, and that goes back to the early 90s into 2000. I was also a prosecutor in McHenry County up north. Mm-hmm. And also way out west in Joe Davis County, beautiful Galena in the Territory. I was a prosecutor there for a couple years. And also in Ogle County, which is Oregon, Illinois, our neighbors to the west as well. And I was telling them this stuff, and the students were very interested. So a couple of them came up to me afterwards and said, "Hey, why don't you run for Kane County State's Attorney?" True story. And I said, well, I thought about that, and that's been something I've really thought about many times. And I said, that sounds like a good plan. So the next day they come in and they tell me the deadline for the selection is in 10 days, that you have to have your name on the ballot. I said, well, that eliminates that. And I said, how many signatures do you need? They said, I think it's close to 600. It was 555. Yeah. So I said, well, if you want to put me on the ballot, go right ahead. The next day they come in with petitions with my name on it. They had searched that, they'd researched it, and they were passing it around in class. I see them passing it around the university. And it was very interesting. And the next thing I know, I'm contacting the party and saying, I better let people know. And then they started getting signatures. And I think at the end, we ended up with about 1,500 signatures, and I'm on the ballot.
Outstanding.
Yes. And then, of course, there was a primary election. I didn't have an opponent as a primary candidate and in the primary. And, of course, now I am the official candidate after the primary. And I will be the candidate on the ballot in November.
Excellent.
And I would hope your listeners get to know me and get to know about me, because we need votes in November. It's at that time, it's really not partisan, because people can go into the ballot and vote any way they want. They can vote for a Democrat here and a Republican here and a Republican here and a Democrat here. So I would hope that your listeners would vote for me and whatever party it is, because I do represent the people of the state of Illinois and Kane County.
Awesome. Well, why don't you take us back then to the beginning? Where were you born? Tell us a little bit about your early childhood and your parents.
Sure. Well, I was born in Chicago and born of a family of three children. I come from immigrant roots, and I come from meager roots. We eventually, after several years in apartments when we were children, my father and mother moving from apartment to apartment, we ended up going into living in Calumet City. So when I was young, for the most of my life, all the way through high school, I was living in Calumet City, Illinois. And a story about that I got to tell you is my father is deceased. He'd be like 104 this year. I think he's 104. He'd be this year, maybe 105. And he died several years ago, many years ago, I should say. We buried him in the neighborhood that we grew up in. So I still go out to my father's grave. And as a matter of fact, before I made the decision to be on this ballot, I went to his gravesite. And one of the things I noticed is my neighborhood that I grew up in 40, 50 years ago is not the same. We'd have a 7-Eleven across the street that's boarded up. The Dairy Queen, which we'd go across the street from our house as well, it's also boarded up and it's got graffiti all over the place. I went down to my church. My church is padlocked. It's closed. Around the corner of my school, they tore it down. The neighborhoods, you can't walk in the neighborhoods anymore. At night, especially, I can't even bring my grandchildren to see where their grandfather grew up. So, and I in that neighborhood we grew up, I had 3 siblings: an older brother, a younger sister, both professional people. My parents believed in education. They were not educated themselves. I believe my father probably finished high school. My mom, I'm not sure. But they did have value in education. One of the early memories I have as a child is my father coming into our bedroom at night, my brother and I. My sister was still too young, and he would read with us every night, and he would open a book up and we would have to read out loud to my father. And so we'd be reading a book. Now, this wasn't Dr. Seuss' Cat in the Hat. This was The Tough-Minded Optimist. I was 5 years old. We were reading The Tough-Minded Optimist from a man who's an immigrant family person and really had not a lot of formal education, no college, but he was making us read these books. And it really did impact my life. The words in there, we would stumble over them and he would underline the words and we'd have to repeat the words, and we began to do that. In my own library in my house now, I still have that book, The Tough-Minded Optimist. It's an old book, but I still have it. I've given it to my children and they've seen the book. And I remember there was a phrase in there that there's no such word as can't, and my dad would say that to us. So I would say, Dad, he'd say, are you going to help me with something? I'd say, I can't. And he said, there's no such word as can't. He was a tease too, but he would say that to us. So that's the kind of way we grew up. It was a close family. We were a small family. Grew up in a 900 square foot house, 1 bathroom with 5 people, very small bedrooms, but yet my parents also sent us to private education. They would work hard. They sent us to private schools. When I got to high school, we went to Bishop Knoll in Hammond, Indiana, and it was a school that was extremely well integrated. At the time, it had about 33% Black, 33% white, 33% Hispanic in the region in that era. And my father knew that was important for us to understand all people. And made a sacrifice to go there. Wouldn't take vacations for himself, but wouldn't do it for us. So that's the way we were raised.
Awesome. Talk about high school.
Mm-hmm. In high school, I played sports, and I also was in theater, and I was also in student council. Everything that I could get my hands on to do, I did. One of the memories I had, which even has gotten me where I'm at today, is I ran for student council president in my senior class, and I won that. It was a class of about 1,200 students, and I won. It was great. And I actually won my 8th grade class too. So there was early instances where I thought political process was good, and I learned how that was. And to represent a student body, it was an amazing feat. And we did something. I think I remember in 8th grade we got a pop machine, which was unusual. So we petitioned the school board, and we got a pop machine. That was one of the big things I did as a student council representative in my high school. We did some things as well. We would do pep rallies and we would support organizations. And so I could see how the process would work and how students reacted to that. So high school, I was always interested in the law, but but I didn't know what it was. I didn't have any lawyers in my family. They were all non-professionals. Like I had an uncle who was a bricklayer, another uncle who was a butcher, another uncle who was an electrician. My father was a machinist. I mean, it was all the trades.
Yeah.
My aunts were all homemakers. You know, it was a traditional kind of household, whether that's good or bad. They raised their children, and their husbands would come home and make the money. But it also gave us the value of family. Prayer was important in our family. We would go to church every Sunday. We would break bread together. We'd say our prayers, and it was enforced in our house.
No, great. So you graduated high school. What was next for you?
After I graduated from high school, I kind of just followed my brother's footsteps. He was going to Loyola University in Chicago, so I went to Loyola University in Chicago. I got accepted, and I was thankful to that. And I moved into the dormitories, Loyola University. Actually, I didn't move into a dormitory. I moved into a place called Gonzaga Hall, which was kind of like a fraternity house, but it was geared more toward religious. So if you can combine religious with fraternity, it sounds like an oxymoron.
Challenge, yeah.
But it was more of a group of religious men who were interested, but we'd have a good time as well. So it was party hardy and also work hard and also pray together. So we had that going. I became a political science major, and after I got that political science degree, what am I going to do with this? So the natural choice later in my life was to become a lawyer, and that's what I ended up doing. But after I graduated, I started teaching high school. I taught high school at Elizabeth Seton High School in South Holland, Illinois. At the time, the school was going through some concerns about staying afloat. The sisters who ran the organization were having some issues. They talked to me. I went back and got a master's degree during the time from the University of Notre Dame. They assisted in paying for that degree for me. And then I assisted them in helping them look at their books. And they ended up selling the school to the Archdiocese of Chicago way back in the day. And I think Seton is still there. As a matter of fact, I think they're having their 45-year reunion that they invited me to. So I was teaching 45 years ago high school.
Wow.
So, and I think it's coming up this summer. So I'll probably see some of the kids from there, well, adults from there now. And so then I did that. And then after I did that, I decided to go to law school. At the time, my wife, who was my girlfriend, got accepted into Drake University in Des Moines, Iowa, for a program in rehabilitational studies. It was the only one they had in the United States. And she was going there. And I said, I'm going to go to law school there. So I went down to Drake and I knocked on the door and I gave my LSAT. I had taken that and they said, when do you start? So I was very fortunate. I got a good scholarship from there, paid for my schooling. It was the only school I applied to. And so I went there and just did it. So everybody always says, well, why didn't you go to a school in Illinois? Well, because there's a bunch of them, good schools. But that was the process that I had. So I went to my law school, graduated in the 3 years, and then got out and started prosecuting right away. So I became a prosecutor in McHenry County and did that for a couple and a half years there, from 89, 90, 91 and a half, I think. And then I ended up going over to Kane County. Okay. So about 1991 and a half, I went to Kane County and it was right before the elected state's attorney got into the office, there was another one in the interim. It was Gary Johnson was at the time. He hired me, and then David Ackman became the Kane County State's attorney, and he was there for 2 terms. So I was there for the time, the entire time he was there in the office. I had the opportunity to do so many things. I mean, during that time, the death penalty was still legal in Illinois, so had death penalty cases, prosecuted those, prosecuted sex abuse cases, child abuse cases, child sexual abuse cases. At one time, I was the prosecutor in the state of Illinois who did the most termination of parental rights for parents who were problematic. And I'm talking about not just they were bad parents. I mean, they did things like abuse, neglect, and their rights were terminated so that these children could be freed for adoption. I believed in permanency of the children, so I was really in a push for that in discussing with the Department of Children and Family Services at the time. And actually, when I left the prosecution, the director of the state agency, DCFS, hired me. That's how much the work I did mattered to DCFS. During that time, I also started what's called the Family Justice Division. We put all the programs that affected children and families together in one unit so we could kind of keep track of it, so they would know what's going on in the families, and we would prosecute vertically that way, or maybe horizontally, I guess that would be.
Yep.
Sorry about that. Vertically would be this way, I guess. So it was horizontal prosecution. And then I also was the author through David Ackman, the Kane County State's Attorney, of the Child Advocacy Center in Kane County. Now, a lot of people like to say they were the first person, but I was the one that actually wrote the program, and I managed that program, and I managed the Kane County State's Attorney's Office as part of the Family Justice Division. So we had several lawyers that worked there. We had teams of prosecution, DCFS, police, social work, administrative, and we all worked together. And it's still the model that they use today in Kane County. It's existed for almost 30 years now. And that's probably, if I die, that's probably one of the most important things I've ever done. It's probably served thousands of children over the years. Now, again, when you say you're the founder, you think like you did it alone. Of course, it took a lot of people, DCFS's cooperation and police cooperation and cooperation of social work agencies and everybody working together. And but it was bringing those teams together, which was the important part of it. It's not a building. It's working relationships. And that's kind of how I work. I think relationship building is important, which sometimes lands on an ancillary note, is why sometimes it's difficult for me to do partisan politics. Like, he's a Republican, he's a Democrat, she's in this. It's so important. It's so important to work together. There are certain things you just can't agree with, and that's okay. But there are 90% of everything that we deal with in the society could have some kind of result if you just sit down and work together. And I believe that working together, like this idea of the Child Advocacy Center and bringing groups together that don't always think the same way and that they're sharing their jurisdiction or giving up their power, it's very difficult.
Yeah.
But if you sit down and you have the right goals in mind and you have the same focus, then you can have great results, which is sometimes what I hear the noise now in politics now. We all love our country. I think we all love our country. And sometimes you start thinking to yourself, why can't we just all get together and love our country together and move toward a result that will be beneficial to all of us? And you start getting the splinters, and you can't always get everything on the same page, but at least it could be better than it is now.
Sure. So why don't you share the story of your transition from being a prosecutor into your own private practice?
Sure. Well, right after I left the Kane County State's Attorney's Office, which I think was about 2000, I actually started working for DCFS. I became their deputy general counsel. I was second in charge in the state of Illinois. I ran the northern region of Illinois. It was divided into two sections, north and south, and then there was a general counsel. It was a gubernatorial appointment, so the governor appointed me into that position, and then I ran the legal service. Very difficult job, you can imagine. You see a lot of abuse, neglect. You see a lot of just horrible stuff to children. And you're representing the agency as well. And sometimes going in to represent the agency as they're fighting against parents who are causing abuse, neglect to their children. So after the 4 years I did on that, then I started my own practice. It was kind of dark days for me. I was going through a separation at the time. I had some younger kids. They were not completely grown. My business, it was hard for me. It was hard for me to make money as you're a starting lawyer out. I had a contract with DCFS. They gave me a contract, but back in those days, they would pay whenever they paid. And the state of Illinois was having a lot of problems. This was like in the 2000s when the housing market was crashing and things were happening. It was just a very, very dark time, to a point where at one point, DCFS, I was working for them on a contract and I didn't get paid for an entire year.
Wow.
And I was working daily, and that was taking up a lot of my time. And my kids were like, younger, and I was trying to pay for their food. It was, and the housing. So I understand also lean times. I think it's made me stronger as a man, stronger as a father, and absolutely stronger as the Kane County State's Attorney, to understand that it's not all just given to you. You have, seeing people go through difficult times, as I did, made me understand sometimes the plight of individuals and judge them less, but find answers to help more. And that's kind of my mantra, looking at that. It's not political. It's about helping families and people move in the right direction. So I also, aside from that, I was also selected a few times by different office holders in Ogle County and Joe Davis, as I said to you earlier, to come out and help them with their caseload. A lot of these were brand new prosecutors that were just elected, because again, you don't have to have a lot of background. All you need is a law degree to run for a state's attorney, and they didn't have the background in prosecution. So they hired me to come out and do some of the larger cases. I did several murders out in the hinterland areas, out in these areas that were not as populated. I did drug cases, child pornography, rapes, all of those cases, and I did those in Ogle and Joe Davis County. So I would be on contract. I'd go out there a couple days, and I'd have a condo out there, and I'd stay, and then I'd come back, and then I'd go somewhere else. So I was doing that. That's how I was surviving as well. Not surviving, but I wasn't taking a lot of private clients at the time. It's hard to establish a private client base. And that's what I was doing. So that was the transition. And then after that, I was, after doing that for several years, I was selected to be the general counsel of the National Insurance Crime Bureau. It's a national agency. It runs throughout the entire United States. So I was in all 50 states, from New York to California, from Texas all the way to North Dakota, and everything in between, Florida. And we were all over the country prosecuting insurance crimes. So I would be assisting with search warrants, assisting with law enforcement officers from the federal government, from the CIA, from Interpol, from local police departments, from state police departments, and working with them. So that's what I did for 10 years. And then I retired from them in the 2021 is when I left. So that's 3 years now. I'd started in 2010 and went all the way to 2021. So that was a great position, and had a lot of visibility throughout the United States. Met a lot of good contacts with people, police, law enforcement. Again, that I will bring to the Kane County State's Attorney's Office. It's relationships, it's building. And at this point in my career, I've been in many different law enforcement agencies around the United States, in the state of Illinois, different counties, different cities. All that stuff helps enrich you to be a better lawyer and a better prosecutor. And that's what I did.
Outstanding. In your time as working for a state's attorney, what was the most memorable case that you had?
Probably one of the death penalty cases that I was involved with. It happened in Aurora, Illinois, where a young baby was murdered. And the evidence showed that there may have been a sexual assault of this child as well. The child was 3 months old. So you can imagine what that does to your psyche, what that does to your spirit, what that does to your physical, what does it does to your mind. And, viewing an autopsy of of a baby, who's been possibly sodomized and murdered. I remember that the coroner, or not the coroner, but the medical examiner who did that, and I want to do a trigger warning to your audience, but when he did the autopsy, he was like in his 70s. He had done like thousands of autopsies, and he wept when he did it. That's how badly the baby was beaten. So it was just a horrible situation. Now, the perpetrator who did it had many, many issues as well. When you look at people under a microscope, like you're doing when they're charged with first-degree murder, you find that their history was awful too. And some of the stories that the defense brought in, which they did a tremendous job, the defense on this, humanized him, and making me, when I'm sitting in there listening about this defendant, actually feeling pity for him, because he went through such torture as a child and had so many things. Now, again, that doesn't excuse people's behavior, and it never should, but at least it gives you some understanding that we have some problems in this country. that deal with, and it might be the way people are raised and what they're exposed to and how they become then criminals.
Yeah.
And there are certain things that are evil, that there's just evil there, I think. There are also certain things that people get exposed to environmentally. There are also maybe some biological elements. So there's a combination of all that works to get a criminal mind. And we study a lot about that as a senior lecturer at Aurora University and also as a professor at Elgin Community College in criminal justice. You're looking at those things. What's making this happen? So that was a very memorable case. I think not only because of the facts, but because the witnesses were there, and just there were so many things going on. I got to work hand in hand with the actual elected state's attorney at the time.
Mm-hmm.
We both did it together, and it was a tremendous experience. He was found guilty. He was sentenced to death. And then the death penalty was commuted in the state of Illinois. It was a moratorium, means they put a hold on it because they were concerned. And then it was commuted and no longer the death penalty. Now it's no longer legal in the state of Illinois to use the death penalty. So now the man who did this is still in the state penitentiary, and he'll serve the rest of his life there.
How about as a private practice attorney? What was your most memorable case?
Well, without divulging any kind of case itself, there's been so many. I think it's, I guess, Lance, I don't know if I have any specific case, but just the idea of helping individuals when they're down and out.
Mhm.
Again, there's a fine line sometimes between people doing good and bad. Whether we want to agree with that or not, some things will tip the scale and have somebody do criminal acts that we can't even believe. Whether it's bullying, whether it's something to do with their upbringing, whether it's something they've experienced, whether it's post-traumatic stress, it's affecting their ability to do something, and to be able to sit with individuals who are really suffering. And when you talk to them and you take the time to really talk to them, there's some goodness in that. That's what we have to find. And to be able to sit there and work with them to try to get the result that will help them be the best they can be, whether that's incarcerated or not, those all are rich to me, when you sit down with an individual. So I'm not sure I have any specific ones. I did represent a man once who was charged with first-degree murder, and it was the death penalty. And not have him committed to death was a big thing. There were a lot of factors involved that were not for the squeamish. Spending time in prison with him, talking to him about the crime, working with other lawyers that work with me, and the relationships we build, those are also rich. But those are all things that make you a great prosecutor as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I'm a better prosecutor because I did first-degree murder cases on both sides.
Yeah.
I prosecuted it and I defended it. And I will tell you, probably the best lesson to be a prosecutor is to be the defense, because you learn so much about how to try cases, number one, which is good for the people of the state of Illinois and Kane County, which is what I will do. But it also understands that there's a human aspect to this. But make no mistake about it, I believe that the way to the future of keeping our streets safe is to punish. And people don't like to use that word anymore. They like to lighten it up and say diversion, and we're going to, do this and that. And there's some good to that. But there's nothing like punishing people. And I'll give you an example why that is, Lance, is because in my own family, when my children did something wrong, they were punished.
Mm-hmm.
And they were punished swiftly, and they were told why they were being punished. And I will tell you, they didn't do it again. And even the way we're built, you put your hand on the stove and you get burned, you're not going to do it again.
Mm-hmm.
If you put your hand on the stove and you don't get burned and you leave it there for a long time, you're going to start putting your hand on that stove.
Yeah.
And you're not going to learn. So the problem is it's not complicated, but you need an element of punishment. And I think people deserve that. And when I saw my neighborhood of Calumet City change, it's because people are afraid to punish anymore, I think. It's like there's something wrong with that, and I don't believe that. And I think the people of Kane County don't want that coming to our area either, to understand that people are going to get away with things and it could make our streets less safe.
Mm-hmm.
That cannot happen. It just cannot happen, and it will not happen under my watch. I do want to say that I'm for law and order, and that sounds mean, but I have a lot of compassion in my soul. I've represented both sides, so I'm not going to do this dictatorially, like you're going to be like, just punishing people for the sake of it. But there's a need, there's an absolute need for people to be protected, and that's my number one priority, is to protect the citizens of Kane County.
Awesome. All right, Andrew, so let's dream forward. It's November the 6th. You've won the election. Tell us a little bit about what opportunities you see in the state's attorney's office here in Kane County. What changes could you make to better serve the citizens?
Well, number one, it's always budget. It's always looking at money. And I think people are concerned, particularly in the society we live in right now, where there's inflation, more tax dollars, and the budget in the state's attorney's office has doubled. And some even say it's more than doubled. We're exploring the budget right now, my team, to look at how the money's being spent. But from the 3 years that my opponent has been in the office, in her tenure, it's changed, double, and it's even been brought up by the county board, like, why is this going so far up? Now, you can always say to pay people more, you want to pay a fair wage, you want to do something, but there's a lot of programs that need to be looked at. Again, I'm law and order. We need to punish criminals for their behavior. There are programs that are probably necessary to be looked at, but that's one big thing I'm going to look at. The second thing that I hear, and I hear that also from people who are in the office as well as people outside the office, that they're concerned about the budget. The second thing I hear oftentimes is training. The training is not happening. And I hope that sometimes through elections, your opponents hear stuff and then they start upping the training. But I talked to several people who left the state's attorney's office in the last several years who said there was no training, that they weren't getting enough training. And some of the prosecutors just don't know what's going on in the courtrooms. So I would have a robust training program as well for the individuals there. Another thing is to take politics out. Sometimes I hear politics weaving its way into the process of prosecution. It has no room there. This is not a political office. It's a law and order office. And it doesn't matter what party you are from or what partisanship. It's not going to be based on party. It's going to be based on facts and evidence. I think that with my experience and the longevity I've had in the criminal prosecution arena as a prosecutor as well as a defense attorney, I understand the value and the importance of getting evidence before you speak, and understanding those things.
So Andrew, let's dream forward again. Yeah, 3.5 years go by, you've been the leader of the office and you're up for re-election. What will be some of the key performance indicators or ways that the citizens will know that you've done a great job and you deserve re-election?
Well, you look at the safety. Number one is the safety of your community. Are your neighborhoods safe? Are you seeing an increase in crime? Are you seeing crime go down? Do you feel safer in your community walking the streets? Do you feel safe going out at night? There's no reason why anybody should feel unsafe anywhere in Kane County, walking at any time of day, at any place. Strong indicator. And again, law and order, prosecuting criminal behavior will stop that. So if we're successful, you'll see that. You'll also see a relook at the budget. Things like that, to understand that there may be surplusages that we have in the office. I will look at that. I'm not afraid of taking a pen and saying, give money back to the county to use for something else. Okay, but I will explore it. And when people elect me, they will know that they're electing somebody that's going to look at it. I'm not going to say what I'm going to do. That would be tantamount to just malpractice. I'd have to look at those, but that's the thing, to look at that. The other thing is transparency. I would also like to see more community prosecution. So to go to individual communities to understand what's going on in their community. So what happens in Dundee might not be the biggest problem that's happening in Aurora. What's happening in St. Charles might not be the same problem that they see happening in Elgin. So everybody has a different importance, and to look at the communities and let them speak to me. I think that would be successful, to hear their voices and to understand. Maybe in St. Charles downtown, it's the fear of the business owners that people are coming in and stealing. That's a bigger issue. But maybe in certain parts of Aurora or Elgin, it might be gang violence that they're concerned about. Whatever that is, we move into those areas and we work with those areas to make sure that they're prosecuted to the full extent of the law to stop behavior. I do believe that strong punishment will, number one, incapacitate. It would also deter, but there could also be a rehabilitative aspect to it as well. And I think that there's all of those things work together to make the answer correct. So if you see some of that happening, then I'm successful.
I remember there was a program in place before the current regime took over the state's attorney, and it had to do with citizens and deferred prosecution. There were citizens groups that actually worked with individuals to help put them on a better path, and that was all shut down. What are your thoughts on a program like that?
I'd have to explore it, but I do like the idea of community prosecution. I like the idea of citizens having a voice in what's going on. Now, you have to pick the right citizens, and you have to make sure that you're doing this not in a way that's vindictive, but some way to make sure, so it has to be the right group of people. But I think the voices of individuals should be heard, especially ones from the community where that happened. And they have a voice in that. So I like that idea. I would explore definitely. That's what I'm saying by community prosecution, community diversion, where they have panels of citizens that would sit on a committee to determine those things. That was done away with. We would relook at that. But again, I'm not just going to say I'm going to do it again. I don't want to make any promises, but those would be explored because I do believe that voices of community leaders and community people and just common individuals should be heard. That's what we're here for.
Yep. Andrew, I'm grateful for all of the time today. If you would like to speak directly to the citizens of Kane County, why don't you share some thoughts on why someone should consider voting for you?
Well, thank you very much. Number one, it is indeed a pleasure to be here, and it's important for people to know who you're electing. I often hear that I don't know who the state's attorney candidates are. I don't know who the judges candidates are. So an opportunity like this is invaluable, and I hope people do listen to it. I'm going to watch how many clicks are on there to see how many people are watching, and I hope it's spread around. And so my appeal to your voters or to your people who are listening to this is spread this around. Let people do it. My contact information is Andrew at Sosnowski for Kane.com, Andrew at Sosnowski for FOR Kane, KANE.com.
Is that proper spelling?
SOSNOWSKI. It's like I spelled it since I've been a little kid. But your voters can go there, and you can always email me or send me a note or message. So if there's something you'd like to discuss, I'm always open to that. So I ask you to know who you're voting for. I ask you to also, the appeal I have is this is not necessarily partisan. I think that we can all come together, and when you have a candidate like me who's done prosecution and defense, and I'm not talking about just a year of defense and this, I have robust careers in both defense and prosecution. I have a robust career in teaching and education and educating our police officers, our young people on criminal justice. I'm not just a flash in the pan on that. I have a robust experience in my own personal life, going through my own personal tragedies in my life, from that made me who I am. All of those things, and raising children and raising grandchildren and being here in this county, all of those things are going to be rich for individuals to have an individual like myself to lead this county and to keep it safe. And that's what I'm here for. I am not here to become something else. I'm not here to become a judge. And this is what I want to do. I want to serve the people of Kane County as your Kane County State's Attorney. And I promise you, what I would tell your listeners is I would promise you that you will have hard work, determination, and I will listen, which is important because listening you learn. And I will always listen, and I will listen to people, and I will be fair, and I will always look at the evidence. I can't tell you what an honor it would be to be able to do this. And I guarantee you that the streets would be safer with me because that's how I'm made up.
Outstanding. I want to thank Andrew Sosnowski for coming in today and speaking with us. Stay tuned for future episodes as we bring in other interesting individuals from Kane County who are out serving the public, giving you, the viewers, the opportunity to know them better. Make it a great day.
Thank you, Lance.
space for all to lend an ear. Love Kane County, where the stories come alive, from the mountains to the valleys, and our voices thrive. Through melodies and memories we find our common ground. Love Kane County, a place where truth